Howdy folks, and welcome back to another episode of Tyria Talk. My name is Richie, and this show is all about the terrific upcoming MMO Guild Wars 2. This is episode number 26, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming Beta Weekend event. That's right, that's Beta Weekend event number 2. They have announced that it is coming up this coming weekend. It is going to be Friday, June 8th through Sunday, June 10th. And the timing of that, I think it's going to be 3 p.m. Eastern Time through 3 a.m., like after Monday morning at midnight, like 3 a.m. Eastern Time. They have their times in Pacific. I do Eastern because that's where I am. So, yeah, that's exciting. And I can just recall in my head a conversation I had with my wife about a month ago where she was like, "Oh, honey," and I was like, "Yes." And she was like, "Could we go on a family trip about the second weekend of this June?" And for some reason in my head, she sounds like Mrs. Doubtfire. And I was like, "Well, I'm not so sure. There might be another, Guild Wars 2 beta weekend. I'd rather wait till they announce something before we make plans." And she was like, "Well, the last beta weekend was at the end of April, so the next one's probably going to be at the end of May, so that would make the beginning of June perfectly acceptable." And I was like, I can't argue with that logic. All right, let's make plans. And then this happened. They didn't have one in May, and of course, they are scheduling the next beta weekend when I will be away, but it's all good. I am looking forward to spending some awesome time with my family. I will get a little bit of playtime in Friday night, and I'll also be able to play a little bit when we get home, maybe Sunday night and stuff like that. So it's not a total loss. So the reason why I'm making a video about the Beta Weekend event is not simply because they're having a Beta Weekend event, but because they've announced that there are a ton of updates between the last one and this one. And they actually made a blog post, and there has been an interview that Elizabeth posted on Massively. They massively interviewed Eric Flannum, and she wrote it up. And there is some information there that I think is worth talking about. So first of all, we're going to be keeping all of the characters from the prior beta weekend. So that's kind of interesting and cool. They want to encourage players to get a little bit higher level. They've actually opened up a new zone called the Gandharan Fields, and that's a level 25 to 35 level zone. And characters who are able to get up to the level 35 range are able to jump into the Ascalon Catacombs dungeon, and they can do that on explorable mode, and that's going to be some real hard content. So there's something for players that have gotten a little more advanced into their character levels, more stuff for them to do, which is amazing. But they also they've added some new features to the game. One of them is quite interesting. It's called the Mystic Forge, and this is in Lion's Arch. And apparently inside this forge is imprisoned a djinn named Zomeros, and he's from Alona apparently. And what this thing is you can actually put in 4 items that you no longer want, and it will spit out a random item back to you. And from the interview on Massively, it sounds like that there are some random recipe patterns. Like the example they give was you can find 4 really rare swords, and you can throw them into this forge, and they will throw a random rare sword back out at you, which could be more powerful. But there's also going to be very specific recipes that have no randomness in it, and there's going to be clues to be able to kind of figure this thing out by exploring the world. Like you put 4 specific items in, and you get a specific item out. And this sounds really cool. It definitely gives you something to do, and it's like a gambling mechanic for those people who just have unwanted items like wasting space. What I don't like is necessarily that part of the fun of this is exploring and experimenting, and that there's just going to be threads and posts and videos all over the place that are going to just compile all the information and just spit out a list of, okay, here's how it works kind of thing. But the counter to this, which I think is brilliant, is ArenaNet has said that they can very easily change recipes and add new recipes, and so there can constantly be this game of players trying to figure out new stuff to put in there and get new stuff out. So I think that's kind of interesting. Think about it, when you get items, now you can, that you don't need or you're not going to use, you can think, all right, what should I do with this? Should I sell it to the vendor for gold? Should I salvage them for some crafting materials? Should I take it to the Mystic Forge and see what I can get out of it? Should I salvage it and take the salvage items and put it in the Mystic Forge and see what I can get out of it? So this is a personal little game that you can play where, it's more interesting than just, selling all your grays to a vendor. So I think it might be an interesting choice. It's something, something different. And we haven't known about it before, so that's kind of cool. The other big news is they're expanding World versus World quite a bit. They've announced that they've added some jumping puzzles, some dynamic events, and some skill challenges to World versus World. So it's like if you didn't have enough to do with all this siege and tower castles and escorting supply lines and all these different things, if there wasn't enough to do already, they're adding even more. They're also adding a new mini dungeon, which is going to be an underground kind of thing that you can compete, with the other players of the other servers for. And there's like a chest in the middle, but along the way you can set traps and different tricks up to try to trap the other servers and do bad things to them. And it just sounds to be a really awesome thing. They've also alluded to this dark room, which we know nothing about, but players can try to get to it. So I don't know. That sounds really awesome as well. Let's see. Some other big changes. They've changed the way that skills kind of unlock. You have to actually have to buy 5 skills from Tier 1 to unlock the ability to purchase skills in Tier 2. And then I think you need 5 there to unlock skills that are in Tier 3. Previously, you could just buy, once you had enough skill points, you could just buy any of the skills that were available. We've also seen some information, though they didn't put this in their blog post, that led us to believe that a similar thing was happening to the trait system, that you actually had to spend a certain number of points in a trait line to access some of the major traits. They were put in tiers as well. I'm not going to go into this too deep because this could be a whole nother Tyria Talk episode in and of itself. If I did speak quite a bit about it with Scott Hawks and Gary and Elizabeth on this week's GuildCast. So you can check it out there to see my preliminary thoughts. But just to sum it up real quick, I'm not going to panic about these changes now. Let's get into it. Let's play it. Let's test it out. And let's see how it feels before we kind of freak out about anything like that. Other changes. They're going to have automated PvP tournaments for structured PvP. Teams of 5 can queue up for this. Once they get 8 teams, they'll run a mini tournament. There'll be 3 rounds of elimination with the winning team getting a chest full of like some PvP kind of goodies and stuff like that. This is kind of like similar to what they will have at launch, where I've read on their Guild Wars 2 wiki, they can have these kind of like pickup tournaments where people win qualifying points if they're the winners at the end. And at the end of every month, they can have like a monthly tournament with all the people that had enough qualifying points for that tournament, and then they can therefore do like yearly tournaments based on the winners of the monthly tournaments and stuff like that. So it's real cool that they're going to be testing it out in game. ArenaNet has said that they're going to have teams that are going to be going against people. They're probably going to be obliterating most of our teams. And that's not quite fair because you've played the game a lot more than us. But anyway, that sounds like a cool thing to do. So just in general, just a lot of like new things that you can do and experience. A new zone, new stuff to do in World versus World, these little mini tournaments and stuff like that, and the Ascalon dungeon, Ascalon Catacombs dungeon. Every time I try to say that, I have trouble. I like said it weirdly or oddly during GuildCast the other night, and here I am again doing that again. That's a lot of agains. Anyway, so there's a couple other quick hits. Some changes that they've made that are just really great. One quick thing, they said they're going to improve combat and give a greater sense of hitting. And there's a lot that goes into the timing of the animations and the different abilities to really make it feel like it actually works. And when it works great, you don't notice it, and when it works poorly, you notice it. Like, I know a lot of people are complaining about the combat in Secret World, and one of the things is they don't feel like they're actually hitting anything. And so I didn't feel like that was necessarily a problem in Guild Wars 2, but it's great that they're making improvements to it and they're keeping an eye on that. The big one for me, improved overflow servers. One of the big complaints was how hard it was necessarily to stay with your party. Anytime you were bumped to an overflow server, some of your party members didn't necessarily go to the same overflow server. And that seemed to be greatly improved in the stress test that happened after the beta weekend. But it's great to see that there's now going to be a UI indicating when other members of your party are in a different overflow server, and a mechanism so that you can actually transport yourself to that overflow server so that you can actually group up with them. And they said it's going to be smarter overall, just keeping the party together while you're moving between overflow servers and the actual server. So I'm glad to hear that. I can't wait to see how that plays out. They've improved the chat. They've added chat bubbles. There's also going to be map chat and some more local chat features in place. There are new key binding options. Yes, you can bind your keys with modifiers, which was a huge request and a huge feedback from the original beta weekend. So now you can actually bind, something to 1, 2, 3, 4, but you can also do Alt 1, 2, 3, 4 or Shift 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's really great. They've made some changes to the UI, saying there's now a square mini-map that is resizable. And there's also a dodge. The dodge meter has moved to above the little health bubble. It just looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit neater. They have said in the interview on Massively that they don't have any options, and they're not planning on any options to allow people to just change everything and resize everything and move everything. But they are going to be listening to feedback and continuing to make these changes based on what we say. Which is interesting. And let's see, the last but not least, they're going to be updating the gem store, and it's going to have like a new interface to it, but also new items in it. And one of the items they mentioned was a box of fun, where it spawns a box, and anyone who touches it has some crazy random effect happen to it. So there's going to be some other fun items in there added to it. So overall, a ton of new stuff going into the game. And I think what's key and important here to recognize is a lot of these those quick hits, the improved chat, the key bindings with modifiers, the improved overflow servers, and some tweaks to the UI. These were some of the top feedback that we had given based on the first beta weekend event. And it's just great to see. Here we are, like just a little over a month since the last beta weekend, and they've already addressed a lot of these issues. They're listening. They want to prove that they're listening, and they're taking action to kind of make these things happen. So, and they've also thrown in some surprises that we weren't expecting. So all of this is just really good news out of the ArenaNet camp, and I can't wait to see it in practice. Keep in mind that not everything is going to be exactly what the players wanted or exactly what the players asked for. They are committing to listening to the feedback. And that includes discussing internally, does that feedback make sense for the game, and making a decision. And sometimes they will implement some things, and sometimes they won't. It's like, for example, the improved UI, they're not going, I know players are clamoring for just options to be able to do absolutely anything. They want to be able to recolor, reskin, resize, move things around all over the place. And it sounds like ArenaNet is absorbing that feedback, discussing it internally, and saying, hey, we're going to tweak this and that. But ultimately, they want to make decisions about what they feel is best for their game. So just because you give feedback, and there's a lot of people giving feedback on something, doesn't mean that they're going to implement it the exact way that the community is asking. But it doesn't mean that they're not listening. So they've listened, discussed, and they have decided one way or another. So that's important to realize in this whole beta process, that it doesn't mean they're not listening if they decide to do something else. That just means that they listened and decided to do something else, and that is perfectly reasonable. So that's going to wrap things up. I hope everyone's excited about this weekend event. In my little bit of playtime, I hope to try to play a warrior. I've not tried that yet. I'd like to get my my hands on see how a warrior plays out, and I will be on the Darkhaven server once again with the Game Breaker crew. So if you're on that server, go ahead and say hi if you see me. Other than that, I hope everybody has fun in this beta weekend. That's going to wrap things up. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave me a comment below. And it's very important, click on that subscribe link so you can be notified when future videos are released. Give me a thumbs up, share this video with your friends and on forums and different places, and help me grow my channel. I appreciate it as always. And you can contact me on Google+, Facebook, and Twitter with any gaming needs. That's going to wrap things up. I hope you all have a great day, and goodbye.
I am Iphigenia Delphire. I'm a hip old granny who can hip-hop, bebop, dance to your drop, and yo, 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 make a wicked cup of cocoa.